Good afternoon and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczynska. Worshippers from around the world have waited for hours to say a final farewell to Pope Francis before his coffin is sealed for the last time. Our correspondent Alex Tykhyi is in Vatican. Hello, Alex. So please tell us what is the situation on the ground.
Well, as you can see, tens of thousands of people are still streaming in here to the Vatican. The access to St. Peter's Square and St. Peter's Basilica will be closed just in the last few moments. Everybody here received an alert from the Italian authorities on their phones saying that the access will close at 5. Then later in the day, we expect the Pope's coffin to be sealed for the last time around 8 p.m. In a ceremony held by Cardinal Kevin Farrell. 60,000 people in the first 24 hours came to see the Pope. 250,000 are expected to come to the funeral. An enormous logistical and security undertaking to get this organized as quickly as it was. I spoke to a major in the Carabinieri, the military police of Italy, about the organization. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
I'm very honored, and it's the most important role in this period of the Arma dei Carabinieri, of the public order and safe of the people around the Basilica of St. Peter's. The organization starts about 1 year before the Jubilee starts in Christmas of 2024. So the organization is the most important and very big.
So a huge organization, as you heard, an honor to be part of that organization, say Italian law enforcement. People have come from all over the world. We saw an enormous Argentinian flag unfurled on the avenue behind me. Of course, Pope Francis, the first Argentinian and first Pope from the Americas. So clearly a very strong symbol for people from Argentina, from around the world. Some people in the crowd said they'd like the next Pope to be from Europe, but that is not the focus today. So many people have come in their numbers to say a final farewell to Pope Francis. The last few will be trickling in the next few hours before his coffin is finally sealed.
From St. Mark's Square in Vatican, Alex Tykhyi. Thank you so much, Alex. Cardinal Rolandas Makrickas spoke on Friday at the Vatican about the place where the body of Pope Francis will be laid to rest. Cardinal Makrickas was personally selected by the late Pope to handle his funeral rites.
And he asked that tomb should be simple and with essential things, and that respects his life. Humble, simple, and essential. And for that reason, the tomb is not big, a great piece of art, but very essential and very simple. We can see that will be only one inscription, Pope's name, Franciscus. After will be his cross, which he was carrying as a Pope and as a bishop. And after the marble is a stone from Liguria, which is the land of his grandparents.
Ukrainian and European officials pushed back this week against some U.S. proposals on how to end Russian war in Ukraine, offering counter-proposals on a range of issues from land to sanctions, according to the full text of proposals seen by Reuters. Our Ukraine correspondent, Oskar Tykhyi, has more.
Ukrainian and European officials have pushed back against US proposals for how the Trump administration sees ending the war in Ukraine. Last week, the US Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, presented these proposals to Ukraine, which would include the US recognizing Russia's unlawful annexation of the Crimean Peninsula and de facto recognition of Russia's control over most of those 4 regions of Ukraine that the Russians attempted to illegally annex. Now, the The Europeans and the Ukrainians, for their part, are saying they're not willing to entertain the talk of territorial concessions without a ceasefire being implemented first. That's something the Ukrainians have been pushing heavily for, an unconditional ceasefire, that they accepted that proposal for the Trump administration. It was the Russians that rejected an unconditional ceasefire. The Ukrainians are trying to put that back to the top of the agenda. They'll discuss territorial concessions, but only once there's an implemented ceasefire to build trust between Moscow and Kyiv. Now, there were also talk of lifting sanctions by the US in exchange for a ceasefire deal. Now, the Europeans have pushed back against this, as well as have the Ukrainians. This would be a majorly unpalatable thing for the Ukrainians and the Europeans to accept. So the Europeans and the Ukrainians have put forward counter proposals to the United States. Now, while Steve Witkoff is in Moscow meeting with Putin for the fourth time in the last 3 months, we understand that these talks, while they may be benefiting US and Russian relations, the Ukrainians and the Europeans are not seeing progress in these talks in a way that they would approve of. And without major European buy-in and without the approval of the Ukrainians, the Americans can't force a deal onto Russia and Ukraine, particularly if they're applying all of that pressure on the Ukrainians and basically no pressure is being applied on Moscow by Washington. So the Americans are in a very difficult position here if they think that they can force these proposals onto Europe and the Ukrainians, who themselves are pushing back and sending forward counter proposals to the United States to bring their perspective back to the top of the negotiating agenda. It's Oz Chatterjee reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
US President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff arrived in Moscow on Friday, where he met with Vladimir Putin. This is according to reports from Russian state media. This marks Putin and Witkoff's fourth meeting in just 3 months and comes shortly after his Russian strike on Kyiv drew public criticism from President Trump, who posted, quote, "Vladimir, stop," on his social media platform Truth Social. Despite this, Trump insists that meaningful progress is being made in the peace process. However, the Wall Street Journal notes growing concern over whether he will be able to exert the same kind of pressure on Russia as he did on Ukraine, as such a move could jeopardize his broader goal aim of restoring ties with the Kremlin. And one more quote from President Trump. "I think Russia and Ukraine are coming along very well," said Trump during a press briefing on Friday amidst the controversy stirred up by the American proposal to Ukraine to concede territory, including Crimea, to Russia in exchange for peace. The comments made came ahead of Trump's departure for Pope Francis' funeral, expected to take place tomorrow at St. Peter Basilica in Vatican.
I think Russia and Ukraine, I think they're coming along, we hope. Very fragile. And Iran, I think, is going very well. We'll see what happens. We're working on plenty of things.
Any updates on the Witkoff Putin meeting, sir? The meeting right now? What do you hope to transpire?
They're meeting with Putin right now as we speak. And we have a lot of things going on. And I think in the end, we're going to end up with a lot of good deals, including tariff deals and trade deals. We're going to make our country rich, but we're going to try and get out of war so that we can save 5,000 people a week. And that's what my aim is. I want to save 5,000 young men. They happen to be mostly Ukrainian, Russian. 5,000 young Ukrainian and Russian men. And that's a big honor if I can do it. I think we're pretty close.
Russia's investigative committee launched an inquiry into a car explosion which took place on Friday morning in the town of Balashikha in the Moscow region. Authorities have confirmed the identity of the man killed in the explosion as Yaroslav Moskalik, deputy head of the main operational directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. This directorate is responsible for overseeing strategic military planning and the coordination of Russia's military operation. Moskalik took part in multiple top-level negotiations on behalf of Russia, including the famous Minsk Agreement, signed by Germany, Russia, Ukraine and France in 2015, which was meant to force Moscow into a ceasefire after the first invasion of Ukraine in 2014. So far, Russian investigators have not named any suspects behind this explosion. And that's all for now, but please stay tuned to TVP World for more news and more coverage.